That night, my daughter screamed at me in the middle of the rehearsal dinner, "You're embarrassing me," then told me to stay away from the cameras. I smiled, placed the thick envelope on the table inside were $500,000 in receipts. Each expense a line item, each signature a price tag. As the chandelier lights dimmed and the orchestra stopped playing, I understood it was time to shift from silence to invoice-backed truth. My name is Eleanor Whitfield Nora, to those who still acknowledge I exist, and I spent 30 years climbing from entry-level auditor to audit team lead at Northwind Accounts, only to discover that my greatest liability wasn't a miscalculated spreadsheet, but my own daughter's shame about where I came from. The engagement announcement came on a Tuesday evening in March. Lila swept into my modest colonial in Newport's working-class North End, her Cartier bracelet catching the light from my ancient floor lamp. She'd been dating Cameron Hale for 18 months, son of Victor and Celeste Hale, whose waterfront estate sprawled across 10 acres of Ocean Drive. The kind of people whose charity galas I'd only read about in the society pages. "Mum, we're getting married next June," she said, extending her left hand to show a 3-carat cushion-cut diamond that probably cost more than my annual salary. The Hales are thrilled. We're having the ceremony at their country club, reception at the Grey Heron Ballroom. I pulled her into a hug, feeling her body stiffen slightly. "Sweetheart, I'm so happy for you. Tell me everything. How did he propose?" She launched into the story, private yacht at sunset, string quartet, champagne from some vintage I couldn't pronounce, but I noticed how her voice shifted when she got to the guest list. "It'll be about 300 people. The Hales have extensive business connections, and Cameron's fraternity brothers from Harvard are all flying in." "What about our side?" I asked. "Should I call Aunt Ruth your cousins from—" "Actually, about that." Lila smoothed her designer dress, a nervous gesture I recognized from when she was 7 and had broken my mother's china. "The Hales' social secretary is handling the arrangements. She'll need a list from you." "But Mom—" She paused, choosing her words like a surgeon selecting instruments. "When people ask what you do, could you say you're a financial consultant? It sounds more appropriate than auditor." The word hung between us like a blade. "I am an auditor. Lila, senior audit team lead. Actually, I've been promoted twice since—" "I know what you are, Mom." Her voice carried an edge I'd been hearing more frequently since she'd started moving in Cameron's circles. "But these people don't understand that world. When Celeste introduced me at the club last week, she said I was self-made despite my circumstances. It would be easier if we just elevated the description a bit." Elevated. As if 23 years of night shifts, weekend work, and missing school plays to meet filing deadlines could be improved with a vocabulary swap. I walked to my home office, a converted bedroom where I'd spent countless nights teaching myself new audit software, studying for certifications, building the career that paid for Lila's circumstances transcending life. From the bottom drawer of my desk, I pulled out a manila folder labeled Wedding Trust Lila XLSX in my precise handwriting. "I've been saving since you were in middle school," I said, handing her the portfolio. $500,000. It's everything my retirement fund, the equity from refinancing this house, even the stocks Grandma left me. It's yours for the wedding." Lila's eyes widened as she scanned the investment statements, bank balances, the preliminary budget I'd drafted. For a moment, her facade cracked, and I saw my little girl again, the one who used to curl up next to me with library books about princess weddings. "Mum, this is God, this is generous. The Hales assumed they'd need to cover most of it since... She trailed off. Since what? Since your mother is just a working-class auditor from the wrong side of Newport. That's not what I meant. But it was. I saw it in how she'd started having our lunches in dark corner restaurants instead of our usual sunny cafe. How she'd asked me to drop her off a block from Cameron's apartment. How her Instagram, which once featured our Sunday morning walks, now showed only her new life, carefully curated to exclude any trace of where she came from. There's one condition, I said, pulling out a second document. My friend Ada, you remember her. The attorney drew up an escrow agreement. The funds transfer to the wedding account, but with a clause about donor satisfaction and recognition. Standard language for large gifts. Lila barely glanced at it. Whatever you need. Mum. The Hales lawyer can review it if you want. As she left that night, clutching the portfolio like a winning lottery ticket, she turned at the door. Oh, the engagement party is Saturday at the Hales' home. Cocktails at 7. And Mom, maybe wear that navy suit you have. The one from Nordstrom, Celeste, says understated elegance is always appropriate. Understated. Appropriate. Elevated. I closed the door and returned to my office, where I opened a new spreadsheet. Column A, expense. Column B, amount. Column C, date paid. Column D, proof of payment. Line 1, engagement party attire per daughter's request for understated elegance. I had 30 years of receipts in storage boxes in the basement. Birth certificates, medical bills, tuition payments, every sacrifice itemized and filed with an auditor's precision. If my daughter wanted to erase me from her story, she'd need to reconcile the books first. The basement storage room smelled of old paper and determination. 3 decades of my life lined the metal shelving units, bankers' boxes labelled by year, each one a testament to what it actually cost to raise a daughter alone, while people like the Hales wrote charity checks for tax deductions. I pulled down the box marked 2005-2010 first. Inside, wrapped in plastic sleeves, were the receipts from Lila's early years. The emergency room bill from when she fell off her bike at age 6, 240 svenlods after insurance, paid in 12 monthly installments. The orthodontist's treatment plan, $800, no payment plan available. So I'd taken a second job doing books for a local restaurant, working until 2 in the morning, then getting up at 6 to make Lila breakfast before school. Ada Morales sat across from me at my kitchen table, her legal pad covered in notes. We'd been friends since our kids were in elementary school together, back when she was a struggling immigration lawyer and I was just starting at Northwind. Now she ran her own firm, and she'd driven over the moment I called. You want to document everything? She asked, reviewing the escrow agreement she'd drafted. Every single expense, every cent. I spread out the receipts like evidence in a case. Look at this Brown University tuition, 2019 to 2023, $312,000 total. The college counselor who got her in $8,000. SAT prep courses $4,500. The summer programs to build her resume $15,000. Ada picked up a faded receipt. Dance lessons, ballet, modern, and jazz, 12 years. $47,000 total, not counting costumes and recital fees. I pulled out another folder. Violin lessons because the Hales Circle values classical training. Piano because Cameron mentioned he loved musicians. Equestrian camp because that's where Newport's elite send their daughters. This is meticulous. Nora, I'm an auditor. It's what I do. I opened my laptop, showing her the master spreadsheet I'd been building. But this isn't about revenge. Ada, it's about truth. She wants to pretend she materialized fully formed in Cameron's world fine. But there's a paper trail that says otherwise. Ada reviewed the escrow agreement again, making notes in the margins. The way I've structured this, you maintain control as the primary account holder. All vendors caterer, venue, florist, band they contract with you, not Lila. The funds are released based on your approval. Add something else, I said, thinking of Lila's request to call myself a consultant. A clause about accurate representation of funding sources. Make it sound like standard financial disclosure. You're thinking ahead. I'm thinking like someone who's watched her daughter slowly erase her from existence. I showed Ada my phone Lila's engagement announcement on Instagram. 200 words about Cameron's family legacy, her exciting career in marketing, their meet cute at a charity auction. Not one mention of her mother. In the comments, when someone asked about her parents, she'd written, "I've been blessed with mentors who shaped me into who I am today." Mentors. Ada drafted additional language while I continued sorting receipts. The medical bills formed their own mountain broken arm from skiing a sport she took up to fit in with Cameron's friends. Appendectomy at 16. Therapy sessions during college when the pressure got too intense. Each bill stamped paid in full. My signature at the bottom. What about this? Ada showed me her addition, funding contingent upon donors' satisfaction with accurate public acknowledgement of gift source and relationship. Perfect, but make it sound less pointed, more financial sector language. How about subject to standard disclosure requirements regarding gift origin and donor relationship status? I nodded, then pulled out the most recent folder. The apartment. When she graduated, I co-signed her lease in Providence. First month. Last month. Security deposit $7,500. When she couldn't make rent during her unpaid internship, I covered 6 months. When her startup failed last year, I paid off the business credit cards $23,000. She knows all this, doesn't she? She knows. But knowing and acknowledging are different things. I showed Ada a text exchange from last week. Lila asking if I could be flexible about the rehearsal dinner guest list since space was limited. And the Hales have so many obligations. Ada whistled low. She's trying to minimize your presence at your own daughter's wedding that you're paying for. Not trying. Succeeding. I pulled out the tentative seating chart Celeste's secretary had sent for my input. Table 32, near the service entrance. The tables numbered by importance to the couple. She'd explained. Nora, you could just refuse to pay. Then I become the bitter mother who ruined her daughter's happiness. No, I'll pay every cent I promised. But I'll also maintain something I learned in 30 years of auditing documentation changes everything. Ada finished drafting the amendments, then looked at me over her reading glasses. You sure about this family isn't a balance sheet? I thought about Lila at 4, proudly telling her preschool class that her mommy counted money for important companies. Lila at 12, bringing me coffee during tax season, saying she wanted to be strong like me. Lila, at 21, asking me to skip her college graduation party because Cameron's parents wouldn't understand why I'd aged so much from working myself into exhaustion. No, I said, signing the amended escrow agreement. Family isn't a balance sheet. But when your family treats you like a silent investor instead of a mother, sometimes you need to show them the books. I initialed each page, then sealed the documents in an envelope marked Wedding Funding Whitfield, Hale. Inside were the seeds of truth that would bloom at just the right moment. The receipts went back in their boxes for now. But I kept the master spreadsheet open, adding one more line: 30 years of love, documented and dismissed. Amount priceless. Status collection pending. The pre-wedding photo shoot at Rosecliff Mansion should have been beautiful. May sunshine streaming through gilded windows. Newport's elite gathered in their pastel best. And my daughter glowing in a $3,000 dress I'd transferred funds for just last week. Instead, I stood behind a potted palm, watching Marjorie Quinn drape her arm around Lila's shoulders while the photographer captured family moments. Mrs. Quinn has been like a second mother to me, Lila told the photographer, loud enough for everyone to hear. She's guided me through so much of this process. Marjorie, 62, inherited wealth. Never worked a day in her life, beamed as if she'd actually done something beyond introducing Lila to the right florist. She wore the exact shade of dusty rose that the wedding planner had designated for immediate family. I looked down at my navy suit, the one Lila had specifically requested, now clearly chosen to make me fade into the background. Now let's get the mother of the bride with the couple, the photographer called out, scanning the crowd. His eyes passed over me twice before Lila pointed vaguely in my direction. She's over there. Mum, come here, please. Not, this is my mother, or Mum. We're ready for you. Just a directional indicator, like I was hired help being summoned. I walked over, feeling the eyes of Newport society track my off-the-rack outfit, my drugstore makeup, my hands that showed 3 decades of paper cuts and stress. Cameron offered a polite smile, the kind you give to service workers. Celeste Hale whispered something to her husband that made him glance at me and nod sympathetically. Stand on the end, the photographer directed, positioning me at the far edge of the group. Actually, could you move slightly back? The light is creating a shadow. 3 steps backward, then 2 more. By the time he was satisfied, I was barely in frame, a blurred figure at the margin while Marjorie stood centered, radiant, essential. The final insult came during the veil adjustment. Lila's cathedral-length veil, another $800 I'd approved last month, had twisted during the positioning. Without thinking, I stepped forward to fix it, my fingers automatically moving to straighten the French lace exactly as I'd done with her dance costumes, her graduation cap, her first job interview suit. Mom! Lila's voice cracked like a whip across the mansion's grand ballroom. You're embarrassing me. The stylist will handle it. The room fell silent. 40 of Newport's finest frozen in tableau, watching me slowly lower my hands. The stylist, 23, maybe 24. Younger than my daughter, rushed forward with an apologetic smile that said she knew exactly what was happening here. I started. Just please, Lila hissed, her voice low, but carrying in the acoustic perfection of old money architecture. Can you not make this about you? Just once. About me. As if I was the one pretending to be someone else. As if I was the one who'd introduced a substitute mother figure to avoid explaining where I actually came from. Victor Hale cleared his throat, the sound of old authority restoring order. Perhaps we should move on to the cocktail hour. I believe the caterers are ready. The crowd dispersed with practiced elegance, leaving me standing alone by the window. Through the antique glass, I could see the rental vans in the service lot invisible from the main entrance. Of course, just like me. Rough moment there. Marjorie appeared beside me, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Lila mentioned you've been struggling with the transition. It must be hard, watching your little girl enter a world so different from, well, from what you know. What I know, I repeated flatly. The social expectations, the traditions, the way things are done. She touched my arm, and I noticed her manicure probably cost more than my weekly groceries. I've tried to help Lila navigate it all. She's done remarkably well, considering, oh, you know, her background. Not everyone can rise above their circumstances so gracefully. You should be proud you gave her just enough to launch herself into something better. Just enough. Like I was a first-stage rocket, designed to fall away once I'd served my purpose. The event coordinator appeared with her tablet, showing me the seating chart for next month's rehearsal dinner. Table 32. I recognized the spot from the floor plan tucked behind a structural column, adjacent to the service corridor where wait staff would pass all evening with their carts and trays. There seems to be an error, I said. The mother of the bride traditionally sits at the main table. The coordinator's smile tightened. Miss Whitfield approved all arrangements personally. She felt this would be more comfortable for you. Less pressure to engage with guests you might not know. Might not know. As if I couldn't possibly have anything to discuss with people who'd never had to choose between electricity and their child's school field trip. I photographed the seating chart with my phone, another receipt for my collection. Then I texted Ada, moving to Phase 2, please review all vendor contracts and confirm cancellation clauses. Her response was immediate. All contracts are in your name only. You have full control. Are you sure? I looked back at the photo shoot resuming without me. Lila laughing at something Marjorie whispered. Cameron's arm around her waist. The Hales positioned like royalty granting an audience. The photographer's assistant was already scrolling through shots on a laptop, and I could see myself in one, a dark smudge at the edge of happiness, as substantial as a shadow. Confirm the venue coordinator has my seating requirements for the rehearsal dinner, I texted back. Table 1, center position, non-negotiable? That's not table 32. There's been a change in the books. The veil adjustment pin I'd dropped lay on the mansion floor, catching light like a tiny dagger. I picked it up, slipped it into my pocket. Evidence of my attempt to mother a daughter who'd decided I was an embarrassment to be managed rather than a mother to be honored. Walking past the cocktail hour, I heard Lila's bright laugh, saw her introducing Marjorie to another guest as practically family. The words followed me to my car, where I sat in the service lot between a catering van and a florist's truck, exactly where they all thought I belonged. But I had something they didn't expect from someone of my circumstances, 30 years of receipts and the power of the purse. And very soon, my daughter would learn that you can't erase someone who holds the books. The email to Ada went out at 11:47 that night. 3 words that would change everything. Go condition green. I sat in my home office, surrounded by the tools of my trade dual monitors, encrypted drives, and the kind of organizational system that only someone who'd spent 3 decades tracking other people's money could maintain. The wedding folder on my screen contained 15 subfolders, each meticulously labeled vendor contracts, payment, schedules, correspondence, legal, documents, and one marked simply contingency. Ada called within minutes. You're sure about this? She put me at table 32 Ada, behind a column, near the service entrance, at the rehearsal dinner I'm paying for. I need more than hurt feelings to activate these clauses. It's not hurt feelings. It's fraud, social fraud, if that's a thing. She's misrepresenting the source of funding to her future in-laws, allowing them to believe they're being generous while taking my money. That violates the accurate representation clause we built in. I heard Ada shuffling papers. Technically, you're right. The contracts give you full control over vendor relationships and payment authorizations. What exactly are you planning? Documentation. I opened a new spreadsheet labeled Operation, Ledger, Truth. Every receipt, every payment, every sacrifice compiled into an undeniable record. Then I'm going to ensure everyone sees it at exactly the right moment. The blue folders came out next 12 of them, each containing copies of the same documents. Cover sheet, financial summary. Whitfield, Hale wedding funding source documentation. Page 2. The escrow agreement with highlighted clauses about accurate representation. Pages 3 through 78, 30 years of receipts. Organized chronologically. Each folder contained a USB drive with a PowerPoint presentation I'd been building for weeks. Slide 1. Total investment in Lila Whitfield, $500,000, 2025. The subsequent slides broke down every major expense, complete with scanned receipts and bank statements. The final slide showed my retirement account balance $1.847. Everything else had gone to Lila. I need you to overnight these to specific vendors, I told Ada, the band leader, the venue's AV coordinator, the lighting designer. Include instructions that if they receive a text with the word ledger from my number, they should immediately execute the following actions, which are: pause service, dim lights to 50%, project the contents of the USB onto the main screen. It's all in their contracts, special client requests for custom presentation elements. Ada was quiet for a moment. This is a nuclear option. Nora? No. Nuclear would be cancelling everything 3 days before the wedding. This is simply transparency. If Lila wants to erase me publicly, she can do it honestly. I pulled up the vendor contracts next, every single one in my name, as the account holder. The Grey Heron Ballroom, the florist, the caterer, the 14-piece orchestra, all answering to Eleanor Whitfield. Not Lila Whitfield or the Hales. They'd been too eager to let me handle the tedious details to notice the implications. The seating chart software showed Table 32 in red. I deleted it, then reorganized the entire floor plan. Table 1 would now be a single seat, centered where everyone could see. My seat. The rest could sort themselves however they liked. There's something else, I told Ada. I want a notary at the rehearsal dinner. A notary for what? Public acknowledgement. If Lila wants to continue with the wedding funding, she'll need to sign a statement in front of witnesses acknowledging the source. Simple, clean, legal. Brutal. Honest. There's a difference. I composed emails to each vendor, attaching Ada's legal authorization and specific instructions. The bandleader responded within an hour, apparently. He worked late arranging scores. Understood. Mrs. Whitfield. The presentation is loaded and ready. Signal confirmation, ledger, will trigger immediate implementation. The lighting designer's response was equally professional. Stage lights will dim to 50% within 3 seconds of receiving your signal. Projection system tested and operational. My phone buzzed. Lila. Texting from whatever wine bar she and her friends frequented. Mum. The venue needs final payment for the rehearsal dinner. Can you handle that? Also, Celeste thinks maybe you'd be more comfortable skipping the cocktail hour since you won't know anyone. Just come for dinner. I stared at the text. More comfortable. Won't know anyone. Just come for dinner. Like I was an obligation to be minimized. Already handled, I replied. All payments complete. See you there? Then I added, I've made some adjustments to ensure everyone's comfort. What adjustments? Came her immediate response. Just some seating modifications. Nothing that changes the overall event. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her final message. Please don't do anything embarrassing. The Hales have a reputation to maintain. I screenshotted the exchange, adding it to folder 12. The master document grew as I worked through the night. Every medical bill, every tuition payment, every birthday party Lila wanted to match her wealthy friends' celebrations. The therapy bills from when her father left $30,000 over 3 years. The car for college used but reliable, $15,000. The unpaid internships I funded so she could build the resume that caught Cameron's attention 6 months at $2,000 per month for expenses. At 3:15 in the morning, I finalized the notarized statement Ada had prepared. I, Lila Whitfield, acknowledge that the complete funding for my wedding to Cameron Hale, 500 new Sue's Nodlos, has been provided entirely by my mother, Eleanor Whitfield, sourced from her retirement savings, home equity, and inherited assets. I further acknowledge that any representation to the contrary has been inaccurate and is hereby corrected in the presence of these witnesses. Simple. Factual. Devastating. The sun was rising when I finally closed my laptop. 12 blue folders stacked on my desk like soldiers awaiting deployment. The vendors confirmed and ready. The presentation loaded and tested. The notary scheduled. My phone showed 17 messages from various wedding participants. Celeste asking about appropriate gifts for the helpers. Marjorie offering to guide me through proper etiquette. The wedding planner confirming that yes, I understood table 32 was my assigned seat. I responded to none of them. Instead, I sent one final email to Ada, all systems prepared, documentation complete, the books are ready for audit. Her response came quickly, God help them when they see the final tally. God wouldn't help them, but the truth would certainly educate them. And education, as the Hales loved to say at their charity benefits, was priceless. The Grey Heron ballroom glittered with the kind of perfection that money could buy: crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light, orchid centerpieces worth more than most people's rent, and 200 of Newport's finest, pretending this was just another delightful evening. I stood at the entrance, blue folder tucked under my arm, watching the rehearsal dinner I'd paid for unfold like a stage production where I'd been written out of the script. The MC, hired specifically by Celeste for his experience with society events, was warming up the crowd with anecdotes about young love. I noticed him glance at his cards, then at the head table where Lila sat radiant between Cameron and Marjorie. The seat to her other side, where any reasonable person would expect to see her mother, remained empty. Because I was supposed to be at table 32 behind the column, invisible. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC's voice boomed through the sound system I'd paid for. Before we begin our dinner service, I want to share something touching about our beautiful bride. This remarkable young woman has overcome so much, including the loss of her mother when she was just 16 years old. The words hit like ice water. Loss of her mother. 16 years old. The crowd murmured sympathetically. Celeste dabbed at her eyes. Victor raised his champagne glass in tribute to my daughter's resilience. And Lila, my daughter, whose tuition I'd paid 2 years after my supposed death, smiled graciously, accepting condolences for a grief that never existed. Such strength, the MC continued. to achieve everything she has without a mother's guidance. Thank goodness for mentors like Marjorie Quinn, who stepped in to fill that void. Marjorie stood, waving like she'd won an award. The applause was warm, genuine, celebrating a fiction while I stood 10 feet away, a ghost at my own erasure. My phone was already in my hand. One word, ledger. The reaction was immediate. The chandeliers dimmed to half power, casting dramatic shadows across the suddenly quiet room. The band stopped mid-note. The massive projection screen behind the head table, installed for tomorrow's wedding slideshow, flickered to life. Total financial support for Lila Whitfield, $500,000, 2025. The text appeared in stern black letters against a white background, corporate and undeniable. What's happening? Celeste's voice pierced the silence. Is this some kind of mistake? I walked forward, my heels clicking against the marble floor with metronomic precision. Every eye tracked my movement as I approached the head table, stopping directly in front of my daughter, whose face had drained of colour. No mistake, I said, my voice carrying in the hushed room. Just an overdue audit. The screen transitioned to the first detailed slide, a hospital bill from 2001, Lila's emergency appendectomy, $15,743, paid in full by Eleanor Whitfield, the receipt image clear, my signature visible. Mom, Lila's whisper was barely audible. Don't do this. Don't do what exists. Because according to your MC, I died 8 years ago. Remarkable that a dead woman managed to wire $75,000 for your college tuition last year. The slides continued their automatic progression. Brown University, full documentation, the apartment in Providence, the failed startup, each expense meticulously documented, time-stamped, irrefutable. Cameron turned to his bride, confusion replacing his usual confidence. Lila, you said your mother passed away. You said you were alone. Who is this woman? This woman, I said, setting my blue folder on the table with deliberate force, is the mother she decided was too embarrassing to acknowledge, the auditor who wasn't elevated enough for Newport society. I opened the folder, fanning out the receipts like a deck of cards. Would you like to see the cancelled checks? Cameron, the wire transfer confirmations. The loan documents where I put my house up as collateral for her business venture. Victor Hale stood, his authority attempting to restore order. This is highly inappropriate. Whatever family drama you're staging. Family drama. I laughed, but there was no humour in it. Mr. Hale, did you know that the entire wedding you think you're graciously allowing to happen at your country club is actually funded by the dead woman standing before you? Every flower, every appetizer, every note the orchestra will play tomorrow. The screen showed a new slide, the escrow account statement. $500,000 transferred from Eleanor Whitfield's combined assets. The dated was 3 months ago, long after my supposed death. Marjorie tried to intercede, her social secretary voice attempting damage control. Surely there's been a misunderstanding. Lila clearly meant that she was orphaned, that she raised herself, that she needed substitute mothers because her real one was gone. I pulled out the notarized statement. No misunderstanding. Just a daughter who thought she could rewrite history without reconciling the books. The room had become a tableau of frozen shock. Waiters stood with trays suspended, unsure whether to continue service. Guests sat with champagne flutes half raised, watching the kind of scene that would fuel gossip for decades. Lila finally found her voice, and it came out sharp with desperation. You're ruining everything. This is my night. my celebration, funded entirely by my life savings. I turned to address the room. Every person here should know the truth. The woman your bride has been too ashamed to acknowledge, the one relegated to table 32 behind that column, is the only reason this celebration exists. The screen now showed a photo Lila and me at her high school graduation. She was beaming, her arm around my shoulders, before she learned to be embarrassed by where she came from. "Stop the presentation," Lila commanded the AV technician. "He can't," I informed her. "I'm the client of record. All vendor contracts are in my name. Which brings me to the next matter of business." I pulled out the acknowledgement statement Ada had prepared. "If you want this wedding to proceed tomorrow, the one I'm paying for while being erased from existence, you'll need to sign this. Here. Now. In front of all these witnesses." "What is it?" Cameron took the document, his Harvard-educated eyes scanning the legalese. "A simple statement of fact. That Lila Whitfield acknowledges the true source of her wedding funding and apologizes for misrepresenting her family situation." "This is extortion," Celeste sputtered. "This is accounting," I corrected. "The books must balance. The truth must be acknowledged, or the funding stops tonight." The silence stretched until it hummed with tension. 200 of Newport's elite watching a working-class woman demand recognition from the daughter who'd tried to bury her alive. Lila's hands shook as she took the pen Marjorie offered. "If I sign this, you'll let tomorrow happen. If you sign it and read it aloud, acknowledging me as your mother and the source of your privilege, then yes, the show you've orchestrated can continue." Cameron's voice cut through the ballroom's tension like a blade through silk. "You told me your mother was dead. Lila. You cried about it. We visited a grave on Mother's Day, whose grave was that." "My grandmother's," Lila admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just let you assume." "Let me assume." Cameron stepped back from his fiancée, his face cycling through confusion, hurt, and anger. "For 2 years, you've let me believe you were an orphan. My parents opened their home to you because they thought you had no family. My mother spent hours comforting you about growing up without parents." Celeste Hale stood slowly, her composure cracking. "We invited you to family holidays because we couldn't bear the thought of you alone. I told everyone at the club about your brave story of overcoming loss." "The story was better than the truth," Lila said defensively, her voice gaining strength. "Would you have even noticed me if you knew I was just some auditor's daughter from the wrong side of Newport? Would Cameron have asked me out if he knew my mother worked 60-hour weeks in a cubicle?" "So you killed me off," I said flatly. "More convenient than explaining the embarrassing reality." Marjorie tried to salvage the situation with her practiced social grace. "Perhaps we're all overreacting. Families are complicated. I'm sure Lila meant no harm." "No harm." I pulled out my phone, scrolling to a saved screenshot. "Let me read you something. Lila texted her maid of honor last week. Thank God I don't have to explain my mother to Cameron's Harvard friends. Can you imagine them meeting someone who shops at Target and thinks Olive Garden is fancy?" Gasps rippled through the room. Several of Cameron's Harvard friends, the ones Lila had been so eager to impress, exchanged uncomfortable glances. I continued reading. "Marjorie is perfect as my stand-in mother. She has the right accent, the right clothes, the right everything. No one questions my background when I'm with her." "You went through my private messages." Lila's outrage was palpable. "No. Your maid of honor, Jessica, sent them to me. Apparently, she has a conscience about watching you erase the woman who sacrificed everything for you. The projection screen had continued its relentless progression. Now it showed the business loan documents, $23,000 I'd taken against my house to fund Lila's startup. The business that failed within 6 months, leaving me with debt I was still paying off. Victor Hale, who'd remained silent, finally spoke. Mrs. Whitfield, what exactly do you want here? Acknowledgement, I said simply. Not gratitude, not affection, just basic acknowledgement that I exist and that I'm the source of this entire production. I turned to address the room directly. Everyone here has been sold a fiction. The brave orphan who pulled herself up by her bootstraps. The self-made success story. The girl who overcame tragedy to find love. But here's the truth. Every bootstraps she pulled was paid for by my overtime hours. Every success was funded by my savings. And the only tragedy she overcame was having a mother who wasn't wealthy enough for her new narrative. This is cruel, Lila said, tears finally spilling. You're humiliating me in front of everyone important. Important, I repeated. That's interesting. Was I important when you needed tuition? Was I important when you called crying at 2 a.m. because Cameron had a family event and you needed a dress you couldn't afford? Was I important when you needed someone to co-sign your apartment lease? I pulled out 3 specific receipts from the folder. Emergency dress for Hale Foundation Gala, $200 purchased April 10th. Cartier bracelet to match Cameron's mother's jewelry at the yacht club dinner, $3,500 May 22nd. Botox and fillers because, quote, Cameron's ex looked perfect and I need to compete. $2,800 July 3rd. Cameron stared at the receipts. You said you saved for months for that bracelet. You said it was a symbol of your independence. Independence funded by dependence, I said. Every symbol of her self-sufficiency came from my checking account. The screen now showed a spreadsheet my retirement account balance over time, the steady growth from years of careful saving. Then the dramatic drop 3 months ago when I liquidated everything for the wedding. That's what killing yourself slowly for 30 years looks like in numbers, I said. That final 0. That's what I have left after making sure my daughter could pretend she came from nowhere rather than from me. A notary public entered the ballroom. Ada had perfect timing. She walked with professional efficiency to the head table, setting down her seal and registry. Ms. Whitfield? She addressed Lila formally. I understand you have a document to sign and read aloud. Lila looked around the room desperately, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. The Hales stood frozen, their carefully curated world tilted off its axis. Cameron hadn't moved closer to comfort her, if anything. He'd stepped further away, processing the magnitude of the deception. If I don't? Lila asked. Then at midnight, every vendor receives cancellation notices. The deposits are non-refundable, but no services will be rendered. No venue, no flowers, no music, no reception. You can explain to 300 guests tomorrow why the wedding they travelled to attend consists of an empty church and nothing else. You wouldn't. I spent 30 years being someone you could count on to never make waves, to stay quiet, to accept whatever corner you tucked me into. That woman died the moment you told 200 people she literally didn't exist. I pulled out my phone, the vendor group message already composed. You have 5 minutes to decide. Sign and read the acknowledgement, or I send this message and walk out of here with the only thing I have left my dignity. The ballroom held its breath. 200 witnesses to a reckoning 30 years in the making, watching a daughter confront the cost of erasure and a mother demanding the simple recognition that she existed. 4 minutes, I said, setting my phone on the table where everyone could see the timer counting down. The pen trembled in Lila's hand as she signed her name at the bottom of the acknowledgement statement. The notary public watched with professional detachment, checking her watch 8:43 in the evening, officially witnessed and binding. "Now read it," I said, my voice steady as granite. Every word, loud enough for everyone to hear. Lila stood on unsteady legs, the paper shaking as she held it. The room remained silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant clink of abandoned champagne flutes. She cleared her throat once, twice, then began, "I, Lila Whitfield, acknowledge before these witnesses that the complete funding for my wedding to Cameron Hale, totaling $500,000, has been provided entirely by my mother, Eleanor Whitfield." Her voice cracked. She stopped, looking at me with eyes that begged for mercy. I offered none. "Continue." She swallowed hard and resumed. "This funding represents my mother's entire retirement savings, home equity loan, and inherited assets. I further acknowledge that Eleanor Whitfield, whom I have allowed others to believe was deceased, is alive and has been the sole financial provider for my education, living expenses, and all major life events since my birth." A sob escaped from someone in the crowd, probably one of Celeste's garden club friends who'd spent months planning showers for the brave orphan. "I apologize," Lila continued, each word seemingly torn from her throat, "for deliberately misrepresenting my family situation to my fiancé, his family, and our social circle. I created and maintained a false narrative of being orphaned at 16, when in reality, my mother has worked tirelessly as an audit team lead at Northwind Accounts to provide every opportunity I have enjoyed." The paper rattled louder now. Cameron stood frozen beside her, his face unreadable. "I acknowledge that my mother, Eleanor Whitfield, deserves full recognition as the mother of the bride and the sole sponsor of tomorrow's wedding celebration. Any previous statements to the contrary were deliberate falsehoods designed to avoid social embarrassment about my working-class background." She reached the final paragraph, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. But the acoustics of the ballroom carried every word. "I ask forgiveness from those I have misled and recognition for the woman whose sacrifices I chose to erase rather than honor. Signed and witnessed this day, June 14th, at 8:43 in the evening." The notary took the document, applied her seal with a decisive thump, and entered it into her official log. "This acknowledgement has been properly witnessed and notarized. Copies will be provided to all requesting parties." I picked up the sealed original and held it up for the room to see. The truth. Officially documented. Then I reached into my folder and pulled out the second item, a burgundy leather portfolio, its cover embossed with gold letters, "To Lila, from the mother you tried to hide." "Your wedding gift," I said, handing it to her. "Every receipt, every cancelled check, every wire transfer. 30 years of proof that you existed because I worked for it, saved for it, sacrificed for it. Keep it as a reminder of what erasure actually costs." Lila opened it with shaking hands. The first page was a photograph her first day of kindergarten, both of us smiling outside the school. I'd taken the day off work, one of only 3 sick days I used that entire year. The next page showed the receipt for her school supplies, then her first dance recital costume. Page after page of a life funded by love and overtime. Mrs. Whitfield. Cameron finally spoke, his voice carefully controlled. I need to understand something. Why this way? Why not just confront Lila privately? Because private confrontations can be denied, minimized, forgotten. But this. I gestured to the room full of witnesses. This is accountability. Your family's lawyer can confirm signed statements before witnesses, notarized and sealed, are admissible in court. If Lila ever again claims to be self-made or orphaned, I have legal recourse. Celeste found her voice. This is vindictive. You've humiliated your own daughter. No, Mrs. Hale. She humiliated herself the moment she decided I was too embarrassing to acknowledge. I've simply provided transparency. Isn't that what your social circle values? Transparency in charity work? In business dealings? In political donations? Why not in personal narratives? The event coordinator approached hesitantly. Mrs. Whitfield, should we proceed with dinner service? I looked at my phone. The vendor group message still waited, unsent. That depends on the bride and groom. The contracts remain valid through tomorrow at midnight. The acknowledgement has been signed. The choice is theirs. All eyes turned to Cameron and Lila. He hadn't touched her since the revelation began, maintaining a careful distance, as if she were a stranger. I need time, Cameron said quietly. I need to think about what it means to marry someone capable of this level of deception. Cameron, please. Lila reached for him, but he stepped back. You let me believe you were alone in the world. I fell in love with your story as much as you, the brave survivor, the self-made woman. But it was all performance, wasn't it? Victor Hale placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Perhaps we should postpone. No, I interrupted. The vendors are paid through tomorrow night only. Any postponement forfeits the entire investment. $500,000 gone if you wait even one day past tomorrow. It was cruel, perhaps, but no crueler than being erased, than being seated at table 32, than being introduced as practically deceased to rooms full of people. The notary finished packing her materials. The acknowledgement is complete and binding. Mrs. Whitfield, you'll receive certified copies within 3 business days. As she left, the room remained frozen in tableau. 200 of Newport's elite, witnesses to the most expensive public reckoning they'd ever seen. The projection screen had gone dark, but the memory of those receipts, those numbers, that systematic documentation of a life's work dismissed as embarrassing that would linger far longer. 5 minutes, I announced to the room. You have 5 minutes to decide whether tomorrow's wedding proceeds. After that, I send the cancellation and walk away from all of this with the only thing my daughter left me the truth, notarized and witnessed. I set my phone on the table again, the timer visible to all. 5 minutes for a decision that would either salvage a wedding built on lies or acknowledge that some deceptions cut too deep for white dresses and wedding marches to heal. The countdown began 4 minutes and 59 seconds. 58. 57. The ballroom held its breath, waiting to see if love could survive the simple, devastating price of truth. The timer hit 0, but I didn't send the cancellation. Not yet. Cameron had made his decision the wedding would proceed, if only to avoid the complete loss of the $500,000. Practical, like the businessman his father had raised him to be. The show must go on, even if the leading actress had been exposed as a fraud. The MC approached the microphone tentatively, looking to me for permission. I nodded. He cleared his throat, and his professional voice filled the awkward silence. Ladies and gentlemen, dinner service will now resume. The waitstaff emerged from their frozen positions, moving with practiced efficiency, as if the last 20 minutes hadn't just demolished a carefully constructed fairy tale. But before anyone could settle into the comfort of clinking silverware and small talk, I walked to the microphone. "One more thing," I said, and the room stilled again. The MC stepped aside immediately. He knew who was really paying his fee. I stood at the podium where Lila should have been thanking her guests, where toasts to the happy couple should have filled the air with warmth instead of this cold reckoning. "The honor of a working mother isn't worth less than any designer dress in this room," I said, my voice carrying clear and strong. "It isn't diminished by shopping at Target or thinking Olive Garden is a nice night out. It isn't erased by a daughter's shame or a social circle's snobbery." I looked directly at Lila, who sat with her face in her hands, the burgundy portfolio of receipts before her like evidence at a trial. Tonight, the receipts spoke for me. 30 years of cancelled checks and bank statements said what my daughter wouldn't, that I existed, that I sacrificed, that I mattered. Not because I could navigate Newport society or speak with the right accent, but because I loved someone enough to give them everything, even when they gave me nothing in return but erasure. Marjorie Quinn shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her role as replacement mother now exposed as participation in a cruel fiction. The Hales sat rigid, processing how thoroughly they'd been deceived by their future daughter-in-law's performance of orphanhood. "Tomorrow's wedding will proceed as planned," I continued. "Every vendor will fulfill their contracts. The flowers will be perfect, the music sublime, the reception flawless. It will be the social event of the season, exactly as my daughter dreamed. But everyone here will know the truth, that it was paid for by the woman she tried to pretend was dead." I stepped back from the microphone, then returned for one final statement. "Enjoy your dinner? It cost me my retirement." I walked through the silent ballroom with my head high, past tables of stunned guests, past the ice sculptures that would melt by morning, past the flowers that would wilt within days, all of it as temporary as the fiction my daughter had tried to sell. At the door, I turned back one last time. Lila had finally looked up, our eyes meeting across the vast space. For a moment, I saw the little girl who used to wait by the window for me to come home from work, who would run into my arms smelling of crayons and playground dirt. But that child was gone, replaced by someone who thought love could be rewritten and mothers could be deleted like unwanted files. The heavy ballroom doors closed behind me with a definitive thud. Outside, the Newport evening was crisp and clear, the harbour lights twinkling like earthbound stars. I could hear the muffled sounds of the reception resuming the show, as they say, must go on. I drove home to my modest colonial, where 30 years of memories couldn't be erased by wishful thinking or social climbing. The basement storage room was empty now, all those boxes of receipts transformed into tonight's revelation. But I didn't need them anymore. They'd served their purpose. My phone buzzed with messages, Ada confirming the notarized documents were filed, several vendors confirming tomorrow's services would proceed as contracted, and surprisingly, a text from Jessica, Lila's maid of honor. "What you did tonight was brave. She needed to face the truth." I poured myself a glass of wine, not the expensive kind they'd served at the rehearsal dinner. just a decent $10 bottle from the grocery store, and sat in my kitchen where I'd helped Lila with countless homework assignments, where I'd taught her to bake cookies for school fundraisers, where we'd planned her future when it still included me. Tomorrow, 300 guests would watch my daughter marry Cameron Hale in a ceremony funded by my life's savings. They'd whisper about tonight's confrontation between champagne toasts and wedding cake. The story would become Newport legend, the mother who refused to stay buried, who used receipts like resurrection stones, but I wouldn't be there. My job was done. The books were balanced, the truth acknowledged and notarized, the payments cleared. Lila could have her perfect wedding, but she'd have it knowing that everyone knew the cost, not just in dollars, but in the casual cruelty of erasing the woman who'd made it all possible. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, past photos Lila hadn't bothered to remove from my walls, her graduation, her first apartment, her engagement party, where I stood at the edges, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just peace. The peace of finally saying what needed to be said, of refusing to cooperate in my own disappearance, of proving that some debts can't be written off, no matter how embarrassing the creditor might be. Tomorrow, the wedding would be perfect. The photos would be beautiful. The newlyweds would smile and dance and cut their cake, while 300 guests pretended they hadn't witnessed the bride's mother demand recognition for the price of admission. But tonight, the ledger was finally clear. Every receipt accounted for, every sacrifice documented, every dollar traced back to its source: a mother's love, too expensive to acknowledge, too thorough to deny. I turned off the lights and went to bed in the house I'd mortgaged for my daughter's dreams, understanding finally that some investments never generate the returns we hope for. But at least now everyone knew who had paid the price. The receipts had spoken. The truth was notarized. And Eleanor Whitfield, working mother, faithful provider, erased parent, had finally, definitively, irrevocably existed. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Leave a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Did Eleanor go too far? Or did Lila deserve every moment of that reckoning? I can't wait to hear your perspective.